Hello. We roll to the end of another week, and here we are in a familiar place with some familiar people and some new faces. Well, perhaps not so new to some of you. But here we are having a bit of tipple, talking about things we don't know about, trying to fix the world's problems. But we've got a guest in the studio today who perhaps knows about some of the things we're discussing. Welcome, Mr. Nigel Chanakira.
Thank you very much, George. And of course, Rufaro.
Yeah, pleasure to have you.
Some of you may know that Nigel has been for the last couple of years the chairman of the Zimbabwe Economic Society. President. I beg your pardon.
A more important job.
Oh, yeah.
And so hopefully he will represent Tinashe and those of his ilk today. I see you've made a good start by wearing a pink shirt and a bright blue suit.
Mm-hmm.
Are those pink socks by any chance?
No chance. He's more colorful than I am.
Are you of the same economic school?
I'm not sure. Where did he go?
Well, he says he's Austrian, whatever that means.
Are you Keynesian or Austrian?
I'm a Christian economist. A big difference.
What does that mean?
Well, I am inclined to poverty alleviation. So I am more to a new school. It's a new, I guess, old and new, where you are running economies for the benefit of the impoverished, and thereby you bring up everyone else.
And who pays for this?
We do.
No, I mean, who pays for bringing up the poor?
Well, everyone does. Everyone should.
Oh, so it's another name for socialism.
Not quite.
Don't you think, though, that free market capitalism makes the pie bigger for everybody and lifts people out of poverty?
The benefits of that are immeasurable. So we endorse that. I agree with that particular approach. It's just that we need to educate the more impoverished about how markets work and make them literate. So, it's a new discipline that we're trying to advocate.
I beg your pardon for calling you a socialist. Your last statement redeems you. What are you drinking?
Tea. Plain tea.
So you're clearly challenging Tinashe. You're an economist and having boring drinks.
Antioxidants contained herein.
And which particular tea?
Tanganda. I was associated with this brand for a few years. They taught me how to be a connoisseur of teas. I recall at the time I had come from South Africa after spending about a decade outside the country. And I had caught the bug of rooibos, which is very, very popular. And when I joined Meikles with the Kingdom Meikles merger, and was being familiarized with the operations. So I went to the Eastern Highlands and then, of course, went through the factory and the fields with the tea picking. And so we got to the tasting room. And there had various teas there. And I asked for tea, for rooibos. Almost just to test them. And they said, we said tea. I thought, wow. I said, what's the difference? And they said, rooibos is a herb.
We call it a shrub juice.
A
heated shrub juice on the shrub.
There you go. So I was then introduced to the different brands and Tanganda with all the antioxidants that are contained therein. And of course, drinking it plain without any contamination whatsoever. The white stuff that we normally put in. So I guess it's an acquired taste. I subsequently went to China as the chairman of the Zimbabwe Investment Authority and went to a tea party, literally, where they sampled various teas. And in China, they probably have over 50 teas. And all you're doing is tasting and commenting. And I fell in love with black teas. And so Tanganda.
Well, to your credit, black tea does have a slight mind-altering effect. So you're leaning
towards
our side of the table.
A little bit of caffeine, yeah.
And what are we having?
Yeah, we're having something much more interesting.
He's a guest. Can you be Are you wearing a tie?
Yes, I thought I'd channel Tinashe, the fashionista, since he's away. And also, I got this as a gift, and there was a subtle hint that there would be trouble if I did not wear it on the show.
I don't know if the camera can zoom in on Orifara's tie, but it's got a fish that's drinking. I think there's a message in there.
Yeah.
So what are we having?
So we're having a Glenmorangie, the nectar d'or. It basically means golden nectar, nectar of the gods. It's one of the better ones. It's aged in an American cask and finished off in a European cask. It's on the sweeter side of the spectrum. I'll let you smell the cork and maybe have a sip and share your thoughts.
Oh, yeah.
As a Christian economist, are you allowed to?
Well, look, I mean, I sampled this stuff at some point. I did drink, but too much. So I'm in a dilution process.
Sounds good, actually.
Yes, it's very sweet smelling, as you get with most of these that are that spend some time in bourbon casks.
American casks, yeah.
Nkoma, it's good to have you on the show. Thank you for coming by.
What an honor, what a privilege. I watched from a distance. I didn't imagine I would be a guest ever.
I think one of the reasons we thought we'd have you is we are very fascinated with what happened in this economy in the late 90s into the early 2000s. The rise of young black entrepreneurs, particularly in finance, but also in several other sectors. And I think you're a central player in that story. Would you like to tell us a little bit about that time, the magic that was in the air?
Yeah, I think I could reflect. I think certainly for the financial sector, we were in an era where the late governor, Kombo Moyana, was intrigued by the number of black bankers, emerging black bankers in the 80s that were occupying managerial posts in the various financial institutions.
So there's Tumbas.
At the time, Mushaya Karara, I mean, we had a host of players in the sector. Nick Vingirai, hired as a consultant to Ghana on financial services.
Oh, really?
The late Gibson Muringai. So banking was beginning to develop. Our managers within Standard Chartered, for example, were deployed to the different countries as managing directors, to the various countries. And so it was clear that what the banking sector in particular had done was train people through the Institute of Bankers, through university graduate training programs, and deploy them in the system. And then with independence, a lot of countries in the region, for example, needed to train up black skills. And so, we were part of that generation. I was clearly younger, but in the central bank. So we went into the central bank, and Kombo was a former boss, effectively. And with the departure of the white community, it meant the blacks began to rise up within the banking institutions. And that's a pattern that we followed. So I, for example, worked in the central bank first, and then moved to Bard Discount House. They were trading treasury bills, government stocks, bankers' acceptances, NCDs, and it was quite an active secondary market. And so that caught my lure, and I eventually moved to Bard Discount House. And it was an interesting era because then Kombo actually said, why can't blacks own banks? Which was...
This is the first time I've ever heard that it was Moyana who drove this.
Oh, yeah.
It wasn't Mugabe.
I am clear. Obviously, Mugabe backed the policy, and it's always government and the central bank. But I recall at the Institute of Bankers, where Kombo actually announced that it's time our local people began to own banks. And of course, that just opened up the floodgates, in a sense, because if it comes from the top, that's what they would like to see. And then, you are able to mobilize capital. Nick had done it in Ghana and watched guys do it in Ghana and support them. And so clearly, when he came, he became the first licensed local banker. And I happen to have been in the same stable as Nick of Intermarket and Gibson. And so within the discipline of discount houses, it was easy to then follow. So it was cut and paste, so to speak, in terms of developing that side of things.
The bank has created a tremendous amount of wealth in that era. And one of the things that I've been curious about is why was all this talent and energy concentrated in the world of banking and finance, and we didn't really see it manifest in anywhere near the same kind of scale in other sectors like agriculture or mining or tourism. It looks like the best and brightest in terms of black entrepreneurs were concentrated in the world of banking and finance.
Well, I think initially, of course, if at the helm, the apex of the sector, in the case of banking, your central bank governor is giving you the thumbs up and urging you on, then you can drive through and get to the destination of launching a bank. So clearly for me, that was the signal. And that's what a lot of people saw. Then, of course, you will recall politically, the late President Mugabe was an advocate of indigenization.
At about the same time.
Yes. So that fervor, grew. And the IBDC was also formed about that time. You had the strives in electrical engineering and consultancy, the Oliver Chidaus. So they did develop. But here's the difference, Rufaro, in that banking speaks to the source of capital. And if other people didn't have capital, we were in the sea of capital. The ocean, money is what fuels, entrepreneurship. And so banking is easy to latch onto from that respect. Although, of course, later on, there are questions that arise about its abuse, in terms of giving insider loans and, non-declaration of correct equity, levels and so forth. But clearly, banking is easier. And of course, there were the different categories at the time. A stockbroking firm just required a license with no capital, actually. And so with Kingdom, our start, for those who care to know about the history, was with Solomon Mgavazi. And that was our first licensed entity, the stockbroking firm. So that's the first company that we registered. All you needed was a license. And then, of course, you were buying and selling, not utilizing your own capital. There was no minimum capital required. Then we moved on to securities trading, which was my forte, along with my partner. And that, again, from a minimum capital point of view, I knew that from my Reserve Bank days. So the least amount of capital for a financial institution, you had to go via the discount house route, which was $500,000. Zim dollars.
Zim dollars?
Oh, yeah.
Rate then was maybe 6, 7?
Thereabouts.
So $90,000, $90,000.
Oh, yeah. And I mean, I, for a start, famously sold my house in order to start Kingdom. And that was the capital I set aside to inject. And then, of course, there was a maximum equity level. So I needed partners. So I got 4 partners. And so there were 5 of us.
Who were they?
Lesia Sibanda, Frankie Kufa, Solomon Mgavazi, and Bag of Purohit. And so, I was the 5th, the founder, dreamer, with a background of the central bank and having gone to Empritech, which is an entrepreneurial development organization. So again, that was a key institution in developing entrepreneurs as well.
Do you think that entrepreneurs are made or born? Because I think a lot of people hearing you speak of selling your house to put money into a business whose future is far from guaranteed, whose success is far from guaranteed. What's your view on entrepreneurship? Is it born? Can entrepreneurs be made?
And there's a prequel to that question. If you watched a couple of weeks ago, we had Phil Mataranyika and Tinashe asked him the question, what made you jump? So as a prequel to Rufara's question, if you could address, why did you jump?
Okay, so my background's like all of us. I think we all have a different story. All entrepreneurs, in truth, have a different story. I'm born into an entrepreneurial family.
Okay.
The first registered bus company in Southern Rhodesia was Modern Express, and it was my great-grandfather.
Wow.
So business came naturally to us as Chanakiras. And as you may know, there are quite a number of Chanakiras in business. And so watching my parents, my mom was a state-registered nurse. Her preference was for me to become a medical doctor. That's the world she was exposed to. But when I watched, at a funeral or a wedding, the guys that had the stature and the respect were the business people. The funeral didn't take place until my dad and his brothers arrived. They gave the speeches. They took care of the orphans. They took care of the widows. They made decisions in the Chanakira village. And watching that as a young boy fascinated me. There were teachers in our village. There were doctors. There were nurses. But for me, the allure of, the nice cars, the fine clothing appealed to me, and the stature within the community and society. So I come from that background. Now, are entrepreneurs born? Are they made? It's both. There is no, one who was born into an entrepreneurial family will tell you, I was born into entrepreneurship. Somebody who studied entrepreneurship will tell you, I made myself, I'm self-made, and I'm first generation, within my family. So it just depends, with the different backgrounds. But I think in that era, in the 80s and 90s, the late 80s and 90s, indigenization was thriving. It was advocated as a government policy. The central bank was talking about it. There was an exodus of white capital and white owners and managers. There were takeovers in businesses. Francis Muati is another name. He did a big corporate finance transaction, and we all thought it was,
Which one was that?
What did Muati do? Muati did the famous what? My memory slips, but it must have been Apex Corporation or something. But he was a merchant banker, and he saw a gap and then bought into a manufacturing enterprise, and the rest was history. And for me, being a corporate finance major, first class in those studies, I knew about mergers and acquisitions. So watching and seeing a black guy execute those transactions,
It was inspiring.
Oh, it was. And, as a result, I was always, we bought DCZ to build capital. We merged. I must have done at least 30 mergers within the financial sector. We waltzed with CFX. We did in-store banking with Mikkels, the first one. We pioneered mobile banking. I actually pioneered mobile banking in Zim. If you remember our card, the Kingdom card. And so just that opportunity of seeing a complementary service to banking that you could either support or lean on was the route to actually growing our brand.
So, so what I'm hearing is you're saying, well, because remember the original question was the magic in the air, and you're saying, well, it was a beautiful coincidence of government policy and other things that were happening, the exodus of white people from the country, and perhaps some other things happening in the region that made us aware of what kind of talent we're sitting on?
Exposure is another one. I think the fact that we had Nick Fingirai go to Ghana, see things in West Africa. Nigeria, for example, booted out the white folks, and the blacks were in ownership of banks. That was happening in Ghana. We had Julius Makoni in the IFC. The exposure he had there was the genesis of NMB and Trust. Yeah. So that exposure,
And
you can only
down the line.
you can only go as far as you've read or been exposed to, and
But
nothing beats exposure.
why don't we? So I mean, when I look at those ingredients, we have them now. White people are gone. Your generation is exiting the scene as some of your seniors are getting into retirement and so on. Definitely exposure we have. The government definitely is talking about. Why do we not have the same things happening today?
I think minimum capital within the financial sector, which I'm more conversant with, is an issue. 500,000 US compared to what now? Commercial bank, 100 million.
Been revised downwards to 30 million.
Yeah,
But it's still
It's a monumental number.
Yes, I mean it's phenomenal. So I sold a house to start a bank. Could you do the same today?
no, you
And,
couldn't.
and I mean, you and I could go down a rabbit hole around Basel and so on. And I agree with you, because my personal view is, in light of the Basel rules,
Yeah.
there should not be minimum capital anymore. The capital you need to trade is embedded in what kind of business you're doing. So, for example, you were trading government paper. Why do you need any capital to trade government paper?
Absolutely. I mean, I'm a fan of that. And in the process, what did we do? We killed a bubbling secondary market. That's non-existent now. Are you guys trading treasury bills today?
No.
Well, there's another reason why people don't trade treasury bills.
Talk to me.
Are they worth the promise?
Yes, yeah, they lose value. So we hyperinflated.
Yes.
And obviously that kills savings, that kills investments, and you slay a key aspect in terms of growing any economy. It's savings, it's investments, it's capital, not chasing goods, but chasing, capital goods that can, grow
Produce.
that. Yeah, absolutely.
Nkoma, our tyrannical director has been away for a few weeks. He's back, and he would like us to go for a break now. And I must listen to him. I might be fired.
Yeah.
So we'll be back in a couple of minutes, but we'll be continuing the interesting discussion. Welcome back. Did you have a chance to go to the little boys' room?
Yes, I did.
Our resident 6-year-old. And since you're representing Tinashe today, did you powder your nose?
I think Tinashe took the powder with him. No powder around anyway.
Sounds like Tinashe.
So before we went to the break, we were talking about those magical years. at the end of the 90s, beginning of the current century. What then happened to the magic?
Well, for a start, the bankers were arrested, weren't they? So quite a number of us actually left the country.
But weren't you guys being naughty? Didn't you guys deserve to be arrested?
Well, no, I didn't think so. I think I ran a program called Making Money Make Sense. I became more vocal and critical of economic policies. They were ruining, the financial markets. And so with budget statements, ministers of finance, I spoke my mind. I wrote in the back page of the FinGaz, and I became an enemy of the state. And so obviously I was one of the first guys to be arrested.
So I'm curious, because I think that we could probably all agree that the current environment, from a just liberty perspective, people are much more comfortable criticizing government policies that they don't think make sense. But you guys, in a much more repressive environment, had the courage of your convictions, and you were able to speak out comfortably about things that you didn't think were working.
Well,
And
did you see how it ended?
and I often get the sense in the current era that the business community is happy to whine about what's not working in private over a drink. But they're not willing, a lot of the leaders are not willing to actually come out and just say, you know what, this isn't working. And why do you think that is?
Well, I think history, people get timid. I was amongst the first to be picked up and thrown in the slammer for very vocal views. We had guys like John Mkushi, if you ever remember him. He was CZI president, and John Mkushi.
Okay.
Yeah, I think he was chairman actually of FPC. At some
FPC
point.
or one of that group of companies.
Absolutely. So John made a statement, for example, very critical of exchange rate policies and so forth. And I mean, he was taken off the presidency of CZI. So it was a less tolerant regime. And I think people became more timid. You look back in history, the bankers, some of us were naughty, exchange rate fluctuations and, people exploiting them. The profitability offended a lot of people. We became very wealthy. So it's almost like your Russian oligarchs type setup, where, as you know, Putin put them in. And so we were put in as well, because and I mean, you arrest 7, 10 bankers, what happens? People took flight, people went to London. I went to London initially, went to South Africa, and I was away for a good decade. And it led some of us to then set up businesses outside Zimbabwe. But, people then became more timid. And Rufaro, you make a very good point. Do business people now feel like they must talk? They don't want to talk. They'll talk behind, having drinks and say the system's messed up, which I think a government should be more authentic in drawing out the criticisms that people have. But if you slam them, if you arrest people, you've got price controls. We had a whole battery of price controls.
But we haven't had price controls. We haven't had business executives. Well, okay, we've had a couple getting arrested recently, but it hasn't been.
It's a different
on the same sort of scale. So why are people in business not speaking out?
Well, you make your money and keep quiet. That seems to be their philosophy. Why rock the boat?
But a lot of them are not making money. Businesses are struggling. Businesses are failing.
Well, then they should be speaking more, but for reasons best known to themselves.
So just to, a quick aside, I saw today on Bloomberg, for example, that the South Africans have committed to spending $900 million every year on exploration. And that's like 5% of the global exploration budget, right? Because they want to take advantage of their mineral wealth endowment and these high prices. We can't even begin to think about doing such things because nobody's going to put money into our country given the current exchange control framework, right? And you'd think that everybody in business,
Would be screaming
especially the miners, right, the exporters, would be issuing full-page adverts in all the major papers saying, look, guys, we need to do something to take advantage of this opportunity. But meh, they're quiet. You know.
The bankers just suddenly get told they must have capital of $100 million. A Zimbabwean bank is now suddenly supposed to be the same size as a Nigerian bank or a South African bank.
Ridiculous.
Yeah, like when it was $100 million before it was revised downwards. And everybody thinks it's well, in private, they'll tell you it's madness. But in public, or as the Association of Bankers, Bankers Association, they will not say a thing.
So I think clearly for development purposes, a more candid approach to, a culture of speaking truth to power, a culture of actually saying, how do we get our economy working? And we have a candid exchange of views without organizations. And here's how it really whacks you. This is the reality. If I'm a CEO, as I was, and I put the entire entity at risk, the board in its wisdom will think that you're a bad CEO. And so what happens? I was sent packing out of my own organization because the board's perceived risk, I became a risk to my own entity.
Really?
And so I was kicked upstairs.
When was this?
When I left, after my 2 arrests. They said, this is too frequent. It will destabilize the bank. And so I was promoted to become a deputy chairman in charge of regional projects. And so
how many regional projects did you have?
So yeah, but I did. I mean, we were in Malawi, got into Zambia, got into Botswana, and South Africa. We were doing a card business in South Africa. But clearly I was a risk. So does a CEO want to jeopardize his career? That is the question. If you're a business owner, as I was, you're inclined to be more,
militant.
Yeah, and you speak your mind because it's your money that you're burning or that's being burnt by policies. But also where you're a manager. And in truth, most are now what? They're not business owners. They're not bank owners. They are bank managing directors. And at that time, you were permitted to own up to 25% of your bank. Now you own 10%, max. So again, all those changing conditions.
Well, you can't own 10% and be management.
There you go.
You can own 10% as an individual, but you can't be management.
Yes. So in that environment, what are you going to say? You're working for someone. It's very different from our era where we were 4 partners. Eventually we started as 5, became 4, and the 4 of us owned 80% of Kingdom. And so when we sat around the table, we had drinks like this. What we agreed was binding because our capital was on the table. And so any policies that messed up our capital, we became more vocal to it. And that's why we were in that era where the banks are at the nerve center of economic activity.
But okay, so can this be fixed? Because inherently, for us to go back there would give the regulator less power. So the regulator would never support such a move. So are we doomed?
I don't think we're doomed in the sense that now, for example, you ask me, I was younger, I was more abrupt, more bashful as a young millionaire. Now I think wisdom gets the better of you. You get to understand your leaders, their culture. After the 2nd arrest, I vowed I wouldn't go in the 3rd time. So I had to reflect.
Did you vow or did your wife vow?
She said, leave the country. What are you talking about? So we left the country. But in coming back a decade later, I mean, I had to reflect and say, this was a failure on my part. Clearly, I failed to articulate in a palpable format what I thought, people were doing wrong. And so I was then able to meet the president, Mugabe, and have a cup of tea with him. And then, quietly give counsel and wisdom to what I thought was going wrong. So it's more I think our culture lends to a more behind the scenes sort of talk, rather than for me to appear on telly, on your program, and then bash. That just does not happen.
So you alluded to being chairman of ZIA, and so you're one of actually a very small number of people who have experience in the private sector, who understand business as a practitioner of business.
I like that question, but before we go to that, I just want to take this up a bit more, because so you've got here Rufaro, he's running a brokerage.
Yes.
And a stock brokerage, and one of the things that's hitting his business is Old Mutual's being suspended. Is it allowed to trade again?
No, you can't trade it here.
So that's a lot of money out of Rufaro's pocket. Some practical advice to him.
Okay. Let's look at the benefits. It's a cost-benefit analysis, surely, Rufaro. What were the revenues that were being made? What sort of employment was generated with that trading portfolio? What was the Forex capital account? What was happening on the capital account in terms of overseas investors? They were more curious. This is a more familiar African stock that they wanted to trade. But obviously it had its downsides in terms of the arbitrage opportunity that it offered, which they thought, certainly in the eyes of either Ministry of Finance or Reserve Bank, if not both of them, then thought that it was a channel to actually allow money to flow out the country. So let's come up with elegant solutions around what we can do to curb that flow, but not to curb the actual trading and all the benefits that accrue with having an African, recognizable stock. It's a bellwether stock. Old Mutual is a bellwether stock. It was. And so to pluck it out means your market cap, is hit. It's got consequences. And I like to think, in all honesty, they're fairly reasonable fellows within both the Reserve Bank and the Ministry of Finance. These are largely technocrats. Unlike our era, Rufaro, we were dealing with politicians, dyed-in-the-wool politicians. And so I think these are conversations we should be having. The Zimbabwe Economic Society yesterday, for example, we talked about, Bitcoin and all the cryptocurrency issues. And we had Deputy Governor Kups Mulambo in attendance. And I deliberately, as president, had him speak last and let the youngsters just show us what could be done in Zim. We had a guy in London, a Zimbabwean in London, doing great business in the crypto industry. We then had a guy who's based in San Francisco, who's involved on the behind the scenes with the infrastructure around Bitcoin. And then we had a Nigerian, an African, showing what that industry has done for the e-Naira. Now, once you've got that, then we had an eminent doctor, Guramatunu, very active, as you know, in the financial market. Sure. There you go. And I mean, he was so excited about the opportunity that this industry offers. And then we had the regulators, Dr. Kups Mulambo, Deputy Governor, then speak. So clearly, it's more tactical. If I had said, Deputy Governor, you speak first, what precedent? I mean, the last time the central bank spoke, what did they do?
They shut down.
Exactly. Precisely.
Bitcoin exchange.
So I think we got to be smarter in the way in which we actually approach our leaders. We got to engage more. I think we've got to be involved in policy formulation. We've got to influence policymakers, and we got to show them the other side. And I think that's the big lesson that I would say, what is it that we do differently? That's the route that we got to take. That there is another way, there is a better way than the current status that and route that they're actually forcing us down.
He can ask you a question.
Where was I going? kind of got waylaid there.
Well, we can take a break then.
Okay.
We'll be right back.
Sawira huya timborangana timboronga tichine mkana andirambe ishe ninobvuma kana mati yangu nguva yakwana sawira huya timborangana timboronga tichine mkana daita isiva ramangwana taingovhunza ndewani mukana dainda isiva ramangwana taingovhunza nderani jana sawira uya timborangana timboronga tichine mukana sawira uya timborangana timboronga tichine mukana daita isiva ramangwana taingovhunza ndewani mukana dainda isiva ramangwana taingovhunza nderani jana sawira uya timborangana timboronga tichine mukana.
Welcome back. Did you remember your question?
No, I didn't, but the producer
It's that stuff you're drinking there.
was kind enough to remind me what my question was. So I was, I wanted to get a sense from you as one of the few individuals who've had experience in the private sector. You understand how the business world works, and you've actually worked in a senior role in government. And I think a lot of us were really excited, after the coup. There wasn't a coup when a lot of people from the private sector were appointed to senior government positions. But sadly, we haven't seen significant reform in terms of liberalizing the economy and being progressive on things like the exchange rate. So as a person who's worked closely with the politicians, what sense do you get in terms of the thinking around the exchange rate and opening up the economy and doing things to legitimately attract foreign investment?
Well, I think it's a unique opportunity, as you say. I was asked to serve as the chairman of the Zimbabwe Investment Authority and was there between 2012 and 2017. And obviously, it was a significant office to actually, carry. In entering that office, I had to understand the culture, the thinking, and what assignment they had in mind for me. And they were very clear that, we have failed abysmally in this particular attempt to attract international capital. If we gave you a blank piece of paper, what is it that you could do in order to, attract capital? And so from that perspective, it was the sort of thing that you would want. In accepting the chairmanship, to then be accorded a blank piece of paper and said, you are the champion of investment, go for it. So I said to them, the way I felt was we would do economic research, we would do a comparative analysis, we would look at countries that were doing it well and doing it better than us, and find out what they were doing that we were not doing. And obviously, and I was part actually as vice chairman of the Bankers Association in defining what was called the Cardoma Declaration, if you ever heard of it. The Cardoma Declaration was made in 1998, where government, private sector, and labor got together and said, what's wrong with the economy? What's going wrong? What's not working? And we defined that the biggest risk that we carried was not economic risk or financial risk or legal risk, it was political risk. And so how do we minimize the political risk was the question. And clearly, we then had to look at our regulations as the investment authority and present a paper to the president or office of the president and cabinet. And we came up with a battery of things: ease of doing business, our measurement on the rankings were very low, and we needed to change a whole host of things. And that began the journey of what is known as the ease of doing business in Zimbabwe. And
So we've been doing this for 25 years?
imagine. And clearly also, we observed, and I was very blunt. I said government operates on 3 speeds, and government is a major impediment to actually attracting investment. Slow, very slow, and stop. And that sounded like an insult, but you had to make a strong statement to understand. And I kept pounding it in until they were so sick and tired.
But
Government operates on how many speeds? 3. Slow, very slow, and stop.
But do you think you made progress? Do you think
Listen
things
to
changed?
listen to this. What that whole effort accumulated in what we now have as ZIDA. We had to change the laws. The ministers and permsecs were so powerful that they could stop an investment. But now, in a one-stop shop, you actually have the power, as did Rwanda, as did New Zealand, as did Singapore, where if a foreign investor or a local investor feels there are impediments, you go to that office, and that office within 48 hours should be able to resolve your issues. That's different.
Has it worked?
Well, look, it's very unfortunate because we lost Dagum Natsi, a practitioner who then, I mean, I couldn't. There was talk of me actually going to occupy the office because I was one of the architects in terms of changing the laws and suggesting changes. But I thought that's not right. I can't change the laws and then occupy the office, because then what am I? This becomes Chanakira's work together with his ZIA board to actually empower themselves. So I thought it was correct for me to step aside and not apply for that ZIDA job. But that, I think, is...
But Nigel, I'm going to be a bit hard-hitting here. Since Zimplat.
Since?
Zimplat.
Yeah.
Or whatever it was called before the Zimplat. What is it called?
Yeah. Whatever. Nothing substantive.
Yeah.
Hartley Platinum.
Yes. Since Hartley Platinum, mid-90s. What meaningful investments have we received?
It's a major challenge, and clearly with the new administration, what did they punt?
We're open
Zimbabwe
for
is
business.
open for business.
And mega deals. Isn't that so?
Yeah.
And so deals were signed. I think I came out of ZIA at the tail end of Dangote. You know, we hosted Dangote, and then that was the end of that.
Where's Dangote? Where's ESA? Where's...
Yeah. So I think
Well, I think
clearly,
the Russians are opening their platinum mine, I think.
well, with their problems, don't pin your hopes on it. They're fighting a war, so it's unlikely that the Russians are going to be your savior.
If you were to ask me, what is the single biggest and most important impediment to foreign investment in our country today, I would say it's exchange control. You know, this idea that everybody knows the rate is 300, but if you're bringing in money through official channels, you're getting half that.
Yeah.
No one in their right mind is going to make an investment where they lose 50% of their value on entry. It's why do you think that we are adamant at having this managed auction and local currency and exchange control?
Now, you guys are opening a Pandora's box. I think I need to come for more tea, because this I think we need a second round. In all honesty, you're not going to crush that question within the remaining 5 minutes. But I think suffice to say that we've got now an exchange control-free zone, which is what they should be punting toward. You know, the special economic zones, the Victoria Falls Stock Exchange does away with that whole aspect.
But it doesn't do away with the risk of some guy showing up at my mine with a gun and saying it's now his.
Well, no. I mean, let's be brutally honest. Those are issues, in my view, George, that can be resolved.
But they haven't.
Well, then sort it out. And these are the discussions that I say we should be having. Sort it out, because at the end of the day, what have all those? We've got the ZIDA Act in place. We've got the touting of open for business. We've got the touting of, you know, ease of doing business rankings having gone up. Do something. You know what it is? Sanctions, sort it out. You made a commitment that you're going to sort out the sanctions, isn't it? So that you can integrate your economy to be a normal economy that gets normal trade, normal bank acceptances, normal trade finance. As long as you've got sanctions, forget it. That's your reality, because everyone wants to operate on normal terms of conducting international business. So whether you change your exchange control, but you don't integrate your economy into the rest of the globe, then guess what? You got problems. So quietly, subtly, we sit down, we hammer out, we have a discussion. And is it an impossible mission to get rid of those sanctions? I thought it was called diplomacy. So get your diplomats to get off their high horses and do some work.
Diplomacy involves give and take.
Yes.
You've
got to climb down. Yeah, it's an imperative, because clearly our economy is some 20, 30 odd years behind the curve. That's a fact. You and I know it. Now, what the heck are you going to do about it? So these are real fundamental problems that we need to be discussing behind closed doors and actually sorting out. But somebody is given that assignment. What do we do in the corporate world? In the corporate world, I ask you, Rufaro, you are MD of the stockbroking company. We are here. Leadership is defining your reality in terms of where we are now. And then you agree, all of you, what our true north is. And where is our true north? If our true north is there, then we got to get there within a specified time. And as MD, I expect you to define your realities now and get everyone to our great, our true north that we've all agreed that you're going to take us. Now, if you fail on doing that particular mission, then we got a problem. So I think on that ticket, I should be invited back for another cuppa. Thank you.
And I think there's nothing left to say. This is a good place to end the show. It's been lovely having you.
Thank you so much for joining us.
And I hope I didn't mess up the show to the point that I won't be invited again.
No, we'll certainly have you again.
Fantastic.
You're a much better version of Tinashe. Much more practical.
Thank you.
As usual, it's been lovely having you along. We don't know what we're talking about, but it sounds like he does. You should take him seriously. Have a lovely weekend. Stay safe. Be good. If you can't be good at it.